Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So let us have our talk right after lunch. So you have to be alert. Okay. I'll be looking at each of you's face to be sure no one is sleeping. Okay. We are going to be talking about Americans and immortality of the soul. When we talk Americans, we talk South Central and North America. But of course, our main focus is in the country that we live. And so we are focusing more on the North American perspectives on immortality of the soul. We sometimes do not think that much because in terms of immortality and in terms of the number of people that actually believe in the mortality of the soul, but it's absolutely huge. It is said that about 90% of the world's population believe in the immortality of the soul. We are talking about afterlife, death, there is something. The belief of each one of these philosophies or religion like Christianity, Protestantism, and Buddhism and Hinduism and Spiritists, they differ, but all of them believe that there is something after death. So with that, it makes our job much easier because this is something that somehow is imprinted in our culture. We have this idea, we have at least the wish, the desire, without necessarily knowing what is going to happen after. The Spiritists have their own point of view. We are going to be seeing some of them. But we see that this is so old in our world that even the Egyptians themselves, that was the number one reason why they used it to mummify the dead, because they had the certainty that life would somehow continue, and they had to preserve the body of the deceased. So let us start by looking at one of the very important figures of this country, Abraham Lincoln, president. So he used to say that man was made for immortality. And surely God would not have created such a being as man to exist only for a day. No. Man was made for immortality. So it's important for us to understand and to start referring to actually some of the important figures of this country and to see how important and how much it is actually referred to about immortality in so many important figures of the United States. So the survival of the soul, even before considering ourselves to be human beings and the offspring of our parents, we are in reality spirits, God's children. So we understand that we have a beginning, we are not going to have an end, and this is a cycle of life or several lives, the way we understand in the Spiritism, that we will be going through as an eternal circle. Immortality means we are eternal, that there will be no end for us. Even Emily Dixon, another very important figure in this country, it is written in her tombstone, called back. And she was the one that had prepared, it was self-written, as we can say here. So another important figure in this country that is telling us that she realized she was returning to some place. There was returning to a spiritual life. So there was something after death. We understand in the Spiritism that we are a three-body or a three-dimensional beings. We have the spirit, that would be this flickering light, the perispirit, and the physical body. So when we pass, when we actually return to the spirit realm, we are going still to be a spirit, a thinking being, indivisible, and that we can send our thoughts throughout all directions. So we have the possibility of communicating with others from the spirit realm and from the physical realm. So we just remove this part of the physical body, the way we understand, the way we give so much importance to matter, but we remain as a being in the afterlife, or in the spirit realm, as we call it. Abigail Adams also had this idea of immortality. So she wrote a letter to her husband, "Until mortality shall put on immortality, and we shall meet again, pure and unembodied spirits." So again, showing that we have this idea. And what would her husband say? So John Adams' ideas of immortality is the following: if there was nothing beyond mortal life, you might be ashamed of your maker, and compare him to a little girl amusing herself, her brothers and sisters by blowing bubbles in soap suds. And I contemplate death without terror or dismay, if finite, which I cannot believe, I do not believe. There is an end of it all, but I shall never know it. And why should I dread it, which I do not? If transit, I shall ever be under the same constitution and administration of government in the universe, and I'm not afraid to trust and confide in it. So he's actually saying here that he has no fear, because he understands that there is a governor of the universe, and that he's going to be still under the direction of this God. What Spiritism teaches us? So Spiritism tells us that as a spirit, we are not created at the moment of the physical conception. That all will attain the degree of perfection compatible with human beings by their personal efforts. Being all of them children of the same Father, they are objects of unequal solicitude. They are created unceasingly during all times, and after death of the physical body, they compose the spiritual population of the earth. All those concepts about immortality of the soul is very, very important for us, especially related to the topic that we are talking about today. The main reason why people give up on life, be it through suicide, be through self-destruction, because they do not believe anymore in that something good can come to them, that they have to try to somehow flee life, is exactly the lack of understanding that we are immortal spirits, and that we will live forever, and that we will have other opportunities to return. And of course, we will be reaping what we have been sown in our lives. So it's very important for us to disseminate this concept of immortality, of, the purpose of life, the reason why we are here. So the more, Adriano talked very well about the importance of education, not the formal education, because thank God we already take care of that in relation to ourselves, to our kids, but the spiritual, moral, ethical education that will lead people to see more to life than just the material aspects. So, and it's interesting because all of that, in terms of researching of spirits, trying to understand immortality, has been researched and has been discussed, not only in the past, but even today, in terms of our culture here in the U.S. Thomas Edison, of course, we know that he was an American inventor, over 500 patents, but not perhaps many of us will know that he tried to invent a machine to communicate with the afterlife. How many of you knew that here? Raise your hand. And this is huge. Let's see what he did. He also believed that if radio waves can be transmitted over vast distance, he thought it possible to develop a device that would communicate with the other side. He knew that someone with great knowledge, perhaps himself, had to pass away and carry on the research in the next world. Nobody knows whether our personalities pass on to another existence or sphere, but if we can evolve an instrument so delicate as to be manipulated by our personality as it survives in the next life, such an instrument ought to record something. So he was actually the precursor of instrumental transcommunication. Have you heard about instrumental transcommunication? Okay, we will be talking in the next slides, but it's how spirits will communicate with us using devices. They use a tape recorder, now they have the computers or the cell phones. I'm sure that if he was alive, he would be the discovered of what we call now the soul phone, calling from one side to the next. And we know that Thomas Edison, for sure, is one of the great spirits that work on the other side of life for the dissemination of spiritual values in this country. And we understand why, because he was into it, he was interested, and he was putting effort in his mind to try to work an instrument and to prove the communication and the existence of spirits even when he was alive. So the evidence of the survival of the spirits. In current days, what we have in terms of this communication? Through mediumistic communication and psychic phenomena. So people that have mediumship or that have psychic abilities, which are two different things, they can actually see the spirits, talk to spirits, and be capable of report the result of this communication. Through past life regression, we have a great number of doctors, psychiatrists that are researching past life therapy and trying and getting information in relation to people that have experienced and are able to recall previous lives. Through experiences of transcommunication, spirit messages by means of television, video, computer, telephone, recorder, and radio, and by experiences even of photographs. Like 5-6 years ago, we had in New York in the Metropolitan Museum a very well-organized exhibition that it was called a Photography of the Occult. And it stayed there for, I think, about 3 months. I had the chance to go there 5 times because people would come from all other places and would like to go there, and I would be like a chaperone or something. And every time it was packed with people, looking at the photos that were actually the result of research as well, to determine and to be able of somehow trying to prove that life would go on. This actually was huge in this country. I don't know if you heard about it, but right after the Sister Fox that we know about, and all the, it is true, it's not true, and all the phenomena start to come about, especially after the Civil War, because many people have lost their loved ones. The need to be sure that life goes on was huge at that time. And this was one of the reasons why the photography of spirits was very big in this country, because people would go after, the possibility of seeing or having their picture taken with spirits that have passed away. So here we have some examples that are in the book of the Metropolitan Museum, Mr. Barnum and the Ghost of Abraham Lincoln, Mary Todd and also the Ghost of Abraham Lincoln. Here one of the most disseminated photograph, most famous, that happened in this wall, in this hall in England. If you research on Google photography of spirits, it's going to come out for sure. There's a spirit that you used to be in this house. So it was. We see that there is this search. The human being needs to actually believe, and especially to know for sure that there is something more, that this is not it, that we have more possibilities of living. I mean, I cannot. Sometimes it's so hard for me to imagine, because I truly believe in, in the afterlife. How can someone go through life without having this belief? How difficult life may seem. With all the difficulties, we've been talking about those subjects here in terms of suicide, in terms of drug addiction. How can we explain all that? And how can we imagine that it's going to be that experience and it's over? I normally say that, I have so much interest in life, in learning things. Only in this incarnation, I would like to have had 4 different professions. I would love to have been a doctor. My mother didn't let me be a doctor. I don't know why, but she was right. I would like to have been an astronaut, and I have my target. I would be the first woman to be in Mars. I don't know why planet Mars. I wanted to be there. It's going to be happening in another incarnation. And a pianist, and of course I would love to speak at least 5 more languages. We have no time for that, right? But since I have eternity in my favor, I still can be, and of course I would like to be one of those crazy scientists. When I was a kid, I had all these little laboratories. I would be dealing with all that until one day my mom found that I was making experiments with a very, very dangerous poison. She went crazy and she threw everything out. Of course, I was devastated, but that was another thing that I would have loved to be in this incarnation. God had a different plans, okay? I'm not complaining. So here we have more pictures that, even if we are going to be thinking about the authenticity of those pictures that I'm showing to you here, some of them may be a hoax, but we know that they do exist, and some of them will be actually photographs that were analyzed and were taken into consideration. This first one is very interesting. It was like about, I think, 12 years ago. They took a photograph of this accident because they had to, to have that for the insurance. And they came up with this image here. And what is amazing, they say, is that there were 4 people in this car. They haven't had any problem. They all survived it. And the famous Kate King, that was actually a spirit that used it to materialize through the medium Florence Cook. And Sir William Crookes decided to study this phenomena. He studied this materialization for over 3 years. And there are books and books, and people study that even today about this case of Kate King. He made such an extensive research that he was able to even analyze the hair and the blood of the spirit versus the hair and the blood of the medium, and attest that they were different. So it was something amazing. And of course, our Chico Xavier here with the materialization of Sister Josepha. And there are many pictures about that as well. Here in this country, following the gate that Thomas Edison had opened, we have a very important person that his name is George Meek. And he was researching and using his fortune. He made a fortune in air conditioning industry. And he used that to create the Meta Science Foundation, where he would be using and building, conducting machines, conducting experiments to prove the existence of the spirit. He actually was able to make a photograph of OBE, which means out-of-body experience, where we can see here the silver cord and more or less him detaching from his body. So it's very important for us to know that and to analyze that and to know where our country stands in terms of research, in terms of history, looking for proof that the spirit goes on and that there is something more beyond our physical body. In an interview, he says the following: a new religion called spiritualism took roots in England and the US and many other countries. A variant called Spiritism took roots and grew in France, Brazil, and other countries. There were many who thought that this new religion would sweep the world. It has not done so. Why? I think that's the question we all have, right? Let's see what he says here. The answer has been provided during the last few years from spiritualists now living on the higher planes. From the higher perspective is speaking through the remarkable direct voice medium, Leslie Flint, Sir William Crookes, Oliver Lodge, Sir William Barrett, Emma Harding Britton, Ellen Terry, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle have said time and again with great sadness, spiritualism has lost its spirituality. It has concerned itself with trivia. So here we see one of the reasons why we don't have the spiritual movement so big all over the world. It's not only in this country, but in this country as well. You know, many of us were actually looking at it more from the material perspective, or at least as a way for us to amuse ourselves, of finding out, oh, okay, there are spirits. Okay, am I going to marry this and that? Am I going to win the lotto, or all the other things that you can say? Only those that try to focus the spiritual aspect in transforming themselves in inner transformation, they are actually going to be lasting. And this is how we have to return and to work and to strive to bring spirituality back in each and every religion and philosophy. Is not necessarily transforming everyone in spiritists. It's bringing spirituality back. It's bringing those ideas that will make people think and meditate about things. Another person that worked at the same time that George Meek worked was William O'Neill. He was also a medium or a psychic person, received communication, and he put it through during 1981 an electromagnetic apparatus and had very extensive record proof of spirits communicating. And he was working, O'Neill and Miller, and it was working also together with Meek. O'Neill was bringing the voices of Miller on record, more than 20 hours of dialogue between 79 and 82. And here we are talking about you having a tape recorder, asking questions, and answers coming in the tape recorder without anybody else in the room. Can you do that at home? Okay. We can't, right? So those were people, scientists, ghost hunters like we have today, the paranormal show, that they were trying to come with something. But of course, there are always people that want to debunk all of that. There are always people that want to discard, that wanted to say that the researchers were not conduct in the way they had to. That's why the Dr. Schwartz, for example, that has been helping in our Spiritist movement in this country a lot, he is so strict in conducting his experiments without mixing it with Spiritism. Because if you put a philosophy, if you put a religion with that, the scientific field will not take that into consideration. So he's doing by the book exactly what has to be done. And he has been describing incredible experiences. In the last symposium that he was present, he was talking about, leaving all these apparatus on, and the spirits going there randomly and talking and putting their voice and showing them their presence. And the difference of temperature in the room, a lot of things, research that are still conducted today. Leslie Flint, also a medium. He is a very gifted medium in terms of physical manifestation. And he recorded voices of George Woods, Beth Green, and he produced over 500 tapes featuring many different individuals, some famous, some ordinary, but all articulate about life and death. You may be asking yourselves, why are we talking about mediums and transcommunication research? Well, because it's very easy for us to answer that. Unless you have a medium present, the spirits are not going to be able to put their voices in any of the devices. So you need a medium. And like himself, a very gifted medium of physical manifestation, because they need ectoplasm. So transcommunication, instrumental transcommunication, is just another manner of spirits getting in touch with us, using a different methodology. But it's the same thing, it's the same result, but we also need a medium present. Of course, we had those that were against all that. They wanted to prove that the communications were not a fact, that all of that were a hoax, and they wanted to debunk all the researches that were conducted. And one of the most first researchers that we had was Robert Hare. But let's see what happened to him. So he considered it, the communications, all of that, an act of duty to his fellow creatures, to bring whatever influence he possessed to attempt to stem the tide of popular madness, which in defiance of reason and science was fast setting in favor of the gross delusion called spiritualism. So in 1853, this professor, emeritus professor of chemistry at the University of South Pennsylvania, began his investigations and devised a number of instruments which, contrary to his expectations, conclusively proved that a power and intelligence, not that of those present, was at the work. So he was trying to prove that it didn't exist. He came with exactly with the opposite answer. And he was true enough to admit that he was wrong. And from that point on, he started researching and doing even more things to prove the immortality of the soul. In the Spiritist Review of January 1858, I think September, we'll see the date, Kardec says the following: if the European press did not support the Spiritism, the same did not happen in America. There is in America, as everywhere else for that matter, a general and special press. The former gave Spiritism much more coverage than in our case. The special press accounts for 18 Spiritist newspapers only in the USA, for which 10 are weekly and several of large format. The large number of American newspapers that cover this subject prove one thing: they have enough readers to sustain them. So there was an interest. People were researching that. 18 newspaper, 10 weekly newspaper, talking about spiritualism, communication, and of course everything that was happening in France as well. And the statistics that Kardec presents in January of 1869 is the following. Regarding nationalities, strictly speaking, there are no civilized countries in Europe and America where there are no Spiritists. They are most numerous in the United States of America. Its number is thought to be 4 million by some, which is a lot, and by others in 10 million. This latter figure is evidently exaggerated because it would comprise more than a third of the population. Can you imagine, 4 million among 30 million? It's a lot. Where are they? But I mean, the seeds are here. The desire to believe is here. We have to go after, these spirits or these people and rescue all of that and bring all of that back. So in Europe, the number can be estimated in 1 million. In France, it's only 600,000. Here we're talking about 4 million. We were huge compared to France or Brazil or whatever. We can estimate the number of Spiritists worldwide in 6 or 7 million. 4 million here. Even if we consider half of it, history offers no other example of a doctrine which in less than 15 years has gathered a similar number of followers spread over the entire surface of the globe. There is work to be done, right, people? And I know that in this room, there are a lot of you that have been dedicating yourself and actually trying to rescue that. We have to bring that back. And I think we have the soil prepared for that. We just have to keep on doing our work, regardless of the difficulties that we may have to do that. We are immortal spirits. We don't need to see the seed that we planted today grown tomorrow. I remember my father always liked it to plant things and more like a farm style lifestyle. And one day he brought this seed of a avocado tree, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to plant this tree here." And then I said, "Oh, well, when are we going to have the tree?" He said, "In 50 years." I said, "What? You're not going to be alive to see, what you have planted?" He said, "Yeah, well, so what? Let's plant it anyway." And I mean, we have to follow the example of nature and not lose hope that even if we are not looking at, a well-formed tree, we're already giving its fruits, that it's not there, it's not growing, and it's not going to actually embrace people that will be feeding and nourishing from them. So our work here is just to keep doing what we are doing, perhaps with more hope, with more, desire to do that, but let's keep at this good work. So, and what would be the destiny of the spirits? Our destiny is always to progress. So in terms of immortal life and living and having immortality of the soul, what would be the purpose? It would be exactly what I just said about the tree. We start as a seed, we go and we grow, through time. And so until we are those beautiful trees and that are going to be capable of nourishing people. So in terms of spirits, it's no different. We started from imperfect to good spirits to perfect spirits, working in the creation together with our Heavenly Creator. So evidence of the survival. We began as an incarnate spirits on our way to God. We have life on earth to be able to learn, to grow, to make amends. There is a free choice in things, either good or bad, that are going to be the result of our decisions, free will. And action and reaction that are also going to determine the causes of suffering and the errors that we have, that we bring in this life from previous existence. So we have this aspect of previous existence. And when we talk about, the idea of reincarnation, and in terms of this country, nothing better can summarize that than exactly what we have in the tombstone of Benjamin Franklin, that he says the following: like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here food for worms. But the work shall not be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more elegant edition, revised and corrected by the author. So he's actually telling us here, I do believe in reincarnation. I do believe I will come back. And newsflash, to believe in reincarnation, you have to believe in the immortality of the soul, right? You cannot reincarnate if you just die after just one life. So it's important for us to have that in mind as well. Other very important characters in this country, Andrew Jackson David, that was called the prophet of the new revelation. He wrote this book, The Principles of Nature, Its Divine Revelation, when he was about his 20 years old, and he was basically illiterate. For those who have seen this book, it's like something like that, and so complex. You cannot understand how could he have written this book. Edgar Cayce, that was one of the greatest mediums in America, was actually the sleeping medium that I would call him. He would get into a complete trance in order for him to communicate. And all he has done was for free. So this is amazing also in terms of examples. Leonore Piper, she was an incredible medium in this country. And the most fascinating thing about her is that she herself didn't believe in anything. She would allow herself to get into a trance, to give a communication, and to be tested by a countless number of scientists at the time. But she herself didn't believe in anything. And so it was a very peculiar case. Today, we have researchers like Brian Weiss talking about immortality. Because from the moment where he had that first patient that went there and started describing mentors around and describing her previous life, he started publishing and dedicating himself to this kind of research. So if you leave it before, immortality of the soul, right? And chances are that you are going to be living again. Perhaps it's not like a cat. You only have nine chances, right? We need much more than that to grow. Perhaps a cat doesn't need that much, right? Ian Stevenson, that our friend Edson presented here in terms of all the cases that has in terms of reincarnation. And Raymond Moody Jr. that talks about experiences of people that have what is called NDE, near-death experiences, where they see people that have passed away, family members, and they get in touch with them as well. Can we define life and death? To where, from where? Those are questions that we have and that we call the perennial questions. So the perennial questions, who am I? Materialistic view, 70 trillion cells. A spiritist view, immortal spirit. Where did I come from? Materialistic view, parents' genes. Spiritist view is spirit world. How should I behave? Doesn't matter. Christ-like consciousness. Where am I going? Back to nature, spirit world. Death and then what? Errant state. What do I take when I die? Nothing. Knowledge, experiences. How is it to die? Same for everyone, depends on level of evolution. So we see the differences that exist in terms of our beliefs. Was actually prepared by our friend Luis Lima. And he did a wonderful job in putting together this, this graphic and putting all this information. So I don't know about you, but I like this much better. Right? I don't want to just be 7 trillion cells. I don't want to be a person that has no hope and thinking that there is only nothing and that is going to be the same for everyone, and I'm just my parents' genes. You know, the idea of us being individuals, the idea of us having the possibility, like I said, 90% of population believe in that. It's just a matter of them realizing exactly what happened after, without dogmas, without, impositions, but as a result of research. And we have to help them in that. So in terms of materialistic view, my life is limited to this lifetime. I have no visibility past death. My happiness is based on physical things. I'm unable to comprehend human justice. It's a very narrow way of seeing life, of seeing yourselves. This is it. Or YOLO, right? I like that. I didn't know about that, YOLO. I learned it today. You're always learning something. You only live once, right? No, we have to come up with a different acronym now. We live more, right? But this is what people are thinking. And we have to, little by little, work on changing their point of view. So what happens then? We are born, we have our incarnation, we die. Then we go to what we call an errant state, the spiritual realm. Then we start our life back again. So what is death in this case? It's just a process. From the human view, we end here. From the Spiritist view, we continue on. So this process goes on until we may not need reincarnation anymore, but it doesn't mean that we do not continue existing. Defining death. First of all, how can we define death, right? We have to work in terms of defining death. At the beginning, you have to hear the heart to see and to determine. That was what doctors used to do. They didn't have any devices to see if the heartbeat was still there. Every one of you would be in trouble if I was this doctor. I'm hearing impaired. You would be one to be buried alive. Can you imagine that, having to depend on someone here to determine whether you are dead or not? Thank God this is over. Then we had the stethoscope that could show more things, and the electrocardiogram, and finally the EEG that will tell us whether there is still even brain activity that is a proof that you are still alive. So when do we discarnate? According to human view, as soon as we are pronounced dead, we're dead. According to the Spiritist view, we only discarnate when there is the separation of our physical body. Here, if you see, he's cutting the silver cord, with the spiritual body. So this is when we discarnate. We may be dead, but not discarnate. It may take up to 72 hours for us to be pronounced discarnate, according to the Spiritist view. That's why, we always emphasize, wait to be buried, wait to be cremated, 72 hours. Science does not define life because life is not material. So if it cannot define life, it cannot define death. And they can be separated because it's part of a sequence of events. we go on and go on. So Kardec, in What is a Spiritist, says, death is nothing but the destruction of the material envelope. The soul abandons it like a butterfly leaving its chrysalis. However, it retains its fluidic body or perispirit. So in the immortality, it's not that we are just like fireflies there. No, we have a physical body, which is our perispirit, and we continue acting with that. So what happens in the process of discarnation? In this case, only the life of the spirit is eternal, the life of the body is transitory and temporary. When the body dies, the soul returns to the eternal life. So it's more or less like this, that we start detaching from our physical body and go on in the spirit life. Survival of the soul. At the moment of death, the soul becomes again a spirit. That is to say, it returns to the world of spirits. It never loses its individuality. It still has a fluid peculiar to itself, and which represents the appearance of its last incarnation, its perispirit. The soul takes nothing of this life away with it, but the remembrance of that life and the desire to go to a better world. We all want to do that, right? We, even without not knowing necessarily what comes next. Sometimes we hear people saying, referring to someone that has deceased, oh, he went to a better life. Maybe yes, maybe not. We never know. It will depend on what we did here. But it's important for us to have this perspective and to understand that we go on. So, the extinction of the organic life causes the separation of the soul from the body by determining the rupture of the fluidic link that unites them together. But this separation is never abruptly. The separation is only absolute when not a single particle of the perispirit remains united to a single molecule of the body. When we talk about the resurrection of Lazarus, for instance, okay, people think that Jesus went there, said raise, and he woke up and started and came back to life again. Not even Jesus can go against the laws of nature. What we see and understand now here is that Lazarus was not yet discarnate. He may even be dead, but not disconnected physically from the body. Because when we come to this point, coming back is impossible. In Spiritism, we mostly assume that he was in a cataleptic stage. A doctor went there, like a Jussara's doctor went there and put her very bad ear next to Lazarus' chest and said, oh, he's dead. And so we put him there. And then Jesus came and said, no, she made a mistake among many that I do. And then he came and brought Lazarus back. So if we have this process of disconnecting the ties that connect us, the silver cord from our physical body, only next time. Not this one anymore, not this body anymore. So it is not a painful process. Everyone is very curious about knowing, am I going to suffer? We may suffer from the process. The illnesses, but not necessarily from, being disconnected. The prolonged illness may actually hurt us a lot. I had a very serious accident when I was 14 years old. I broke myself in so many different places. And but what was, at that time, I was already a Spiritist, and I studied a lot, or even the books from André Luiz. I almost, at that time, had all read, not understood, of course, the whole collection of André Luiz. And so, of course, when I came back from the accident, it was one of my most interesting discoveries. I lost my conscience, and I didn't feel anything. After that was hell. But at the moment where I had the accident and that I broke my heart stopped, I broke at several parts of my body, even the femur, that it's the most horrible one to break. I felt nothing. So to me, the conclusion is, if I had died at that moment, I would not have felt any pain, even from the process of the accident itself. So, and they tell us that it's not a painful process. He who has done evil is overwhelmed with shame for his wrongdoing, but the righteous seems to be eased of a heavy load. The pain is more of a moral pain, of a regret. I could have done that and I didn't, or I did that and I shouldn't. You know, all these things, the lost opportunities, the errors that we committed, or, you know, this idea. I mean, it's good to know that we are immortal, but not to postpone good decisions and deliberations in this lifetime. Thinking, I have all the time of the world. Yes, you do. But it's good not to waste time in your pathway to happiness. Right? Perispirit survives the death of the body. Like we said, we still have a body. And separation happens gradually. The more material, the longest it will take. But we have to be thinking that when we are talking about returning home, returning to the spirit realm, it may represent as well a moment of happiness. We are going to meet our loved ones that have preceded us, not only from this incarnation, but from previous ones. We are going to be free of, you know, what we still call our planet a prison, a hospital. So if we have used our opportunity wisely, we are going to be having a very, very beautiful and happy return. Of course, we will miss our family members, our loved ones will miss us much more than we will miss them, because we will be able to go and visit them at our will if we have the condition to do so. So it's not that they are lost to us. And for us, the ones that stay here, we will be always remembering that, and with the certainty, having the certainty that we will meet again. That's why, you know, to try to live a better, more moral, ethical life, to actually not going that much against the laws of nature, it's so much good for us. You know, when we give ourselves to despair, when we resort to things like suicide or drugs like we are talking about here, you know, we are going to be having much more difficulty in recovering ourselves, in getting closer to our loved ones, in coming back in the way we are coming back, like it was presented here. So it is in our hands, in our possibilities to do that. And remember, for those who might be thinking now, maybe it's too late for me. I wasted so much time, it's still not going to be possible. Well, remember the workers of the last hour? The parable of Jesus? That, you know, one started at the 11th hour, meaning right at the beginning of the day, and the other one started just at the last hour and received the same payment. What does this mean? It is a transformation. It doesn't matter how long we are in the process, as long as we are in the process. So if now I am sure that this is the way for me to do, this is the right path for me in terms of evolvement, I'm the worker of the last hour, and I will be rewarded accordingly. Because it's just a matter of awakening. You know, when we awake for something, it's just that. It doesn't matter how old you are and how long you are in this path. For some of us, we need more time. Others, sometimes they don't need that much. So do not believe that because of your age, because of your lack of opportunity of knowing this before, you're not going to be entitled to have this beautiful and happy return. Sometimes even more than those that may be longer in this field, because what it requires from us is to have a pure heart. And as long as we are working in this pure heart, we are in the way of our transformation. And to finish our presentation, we brought a communication that we have received from the group of spirits that work with Abraham Lincoln, and that has everything to do with what we have been talking today. So I'll be reading it to you, or maybe you want to read it? Come here. I'll call my better half. Huh? Com ênfase. Oh, you need that. Close.
Yeah. I greet you all with respect for this work. The human beings who inhabit this planet do not belong to such and such country. They are all citizens of the world and will experience life in many parts of this sphere that we call home. For now, you have been assigned to serve in this country, even though many of you are not originally from it. Of what importance is that? Actually, none. What is crucial is for you to embrace the people who will come to you as brothers and sisters, as they truly are. Work for the spiritual nourishment of this land, the cradle of freedom, and the one destined to lead others through its examples. Go and put forth your work. Declare to all the existence of the spiritual world. Many will regard you with disbelief, but you will be surprised at the number of those who are thirsting for this knowledge. A populous group of spiritual friends has been working from this side of life to prepare the terrain for this endeavor. It is up to you now to work as dedicated laborers, spreading the seeds and making sure they will receive the proper care in order to grow. Enlightened minds, but most importantly, dedicated hearts, have been tirelessly working in order for this to take place. Before returning to Earth, you, yourselves, have accepted the task to come and to participate in this work. You know who we are, but we will remain humbly assigning all the results of our work to the one who came here to save us all. Be with Jesus in your hearts and work for the settlement of the spiritual constitution of this country. From the group of spirits that serve with Abraham Lincoln.
I cannot say anything after that. So thank you so much. And let's continue with our presentations.